And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Greetings, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska marine weather coming up here for the next couple of days. First, checking the sea ice. We are seeing ice development along the Arctic coast, all along from areas of around Cape Lisburne on up through Wainwright, Utqiagvik, eastward through Kaktovik, as well as in and around areas of Kotzebue, Norton Sounds, and extending down along the southwest coast, the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas. And we've had some pretty chilly temperatures in this area. And as a result, the ice will continue to gradually build here as we move into the month of November. And looking at tonight's synoptic setting, early Friday morning, 4 a.m., we expect low pressure, the lower Bering Sea, trough extending, inverted trough up toward the Bering Strait. And there is a system way up in the Arctic Ocean with a trough there pushing through the northwest and central Arctic coast. Huge area of high pressure at the surface and in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. It's pretty much stacked from the Gulf and southeastern mainland up into northwestern Canada. By Friday afternoon, that high still remains anchored, influencing south central eastern areas of the mainland along the Alcan border and Panhandle. We find an area of low pressure lifting and weakening as it moves up out of the North Pacific toward the eastern Aleutians, and then this low sitting out here over the central Bering. Not especially strong, but there is a flow of moisture on the backside of this big ridge of high pressure that is going to eventually lead to some areas of precipitation. Some mixed precipitation will be possible along areas of the west coast into the western interior as we go through this weekend, especially later Friday into Saturday and early Sunday. And by Saturday afternoon, we find this frontal system kind of washing out, but that southerly flow of moisture continuing. And with the colder air encountered along this area, we would anticipate there could be some mixed precipitation, some rain and snow, and perhaps even a little bit of light freezing rain. But for areas of the southeast panhandle, winds on Friday will be out of the northwest at 10 knots there for the inner channels, waves running only a couple of feet. Outer coast, generally north to northwest winds 10 to 15 knots. Waves 3 to 4 feet, winds are more variable as you get out toward Cape Suckling, around 5 knots as you're kind of beneath that center of high pressure. Saturday, we expect variable to northwest winds 5 to 10 knots for the inner channels, with waves again only a foot or two. For the outer coast, north to northwest winds 10 to 15 knots and waves generally again around 3-4 feet. For the northwestern Gulf and Cook Inlet, we're looking at variable winds here outside of Hinchinbrook entrance, and also Prince William Sound, variable winds around 10 knots, waves 2 feet or so within Prince William Sound. For Upper Cook Inlet, Turnagain Arm, Kennett Arm, we're looking northeast winds 10 knots, waves a foot or two. As we drop down through the lower Cook Inlet off of Anchor Point and into Kennedy Entrance, we expect northeast to east winds 20 knots, waves 5 to 6 feet. And for Saturday, winds will generally be out of the east and increasing the further southwestward you get. East winds to 15 knots here within Prince William Sound, a couple of foot waves. Northeast winds 15 knots, Upper Cook Inlet 4 foot waves, but those will increase northeast to east 25 to 30 knots with waves as much as 10, 11 feet there. Kamishak Bay and into the entrance of Cook Inlet with 35 knot easterly gales there just northeast of Kodiak City. For Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, easterly winds across Kodiak Island on Friday at 20 knots, waves 5 feet within Shelikof Strait. Those winds pick up to 30 knots or so, even some stronger winds upwards of 35 knot gales coming out of the gap there from the southeast. And waves on the North Pacific side, 9 to as high as 12 feet, 4 to 5 feet on the Bering side. And for Saturday, look for east-northeast winds in the vicinity of Kodiak Island at 30 knots with waves around 10 feet. Winds 30 knots there out of the east there, Chicknick, as well as within Bristol Bay, 5-foot waves turning east to southeast at 15 to 20 knots as you tail out here down through the lower portion of the Alaska Panhandle, Cold Bay, and False Pass. For the Aleutians, kind of a mixed bag of winds here across the eastern Aleutians at 20 to 25 knots, either out of the east, southeast ahead of a trough, then shifting northwest to west, 20 knots. Waves generally 7 to as high as 10 feet on the North Pacific side and 5 to 7 feet on the Bering side. Come Saturday, we'll see another push of colder air coming in here on the backside of a low that's going to be sitting out here in the central Bering. So ahead of it, southeast winds 15 knots, shifting though to the northwest at about 25 to 30 knots once you get west of Adak. Waves there 9 to 12 feet, but ahead of that there, waves generally 4 to 6 feet. And along the southwest coast, some pretty decent wind flow from the east-southeast, 30 to 35 knots from Bristol Bay out through Kuskokwim Bay to St. Matthew, where waves could be running 5 to 7 feet within Bristol and Kuskokwim Bays. Offshore flow 20 to 25 knots here, the lower Yukon Delta, with waves at 4 to 5 feet. And those winds will come down a bit Saturday, though still 30 knots east to southeast there, Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays. Waves running right around 5 to 6 feet. Southeast winds to 20 knots, St. Matthew down to St. Paul. And look for southeasterly offshore flow here in Norton Sound and down toward Hooper Bay at 25 knots with waves of 4 to 5 feet once you get a bit offshore. And then across the far northern Bering, easterly winds 20 knots on Friday, Norton Sound and off of Port Clarence and Wales, falling off to 10 to 15 knot easterly winds through the lower Chukchi Sea, waves 3 to 4 feet, and then winds up along the Arctic coast do turn more westerly, 20 to as high as 25 knots in the vicinity of Kaktovik with waves of 4 to 6 feet. And for Saturday, we expect the winds to turn around out of the east at 20 knots with waves of 4 feet. Southeasterly winds to 25 knots at Utqiagvik Vero. And then down along the lower Chukchi Sea, in through the Bering Strait, we expect southeast winds of 25 knots with waves generally 5 to 6 feet, including on the north side of St. Lawrence Island.